The shadows of the Fourth Corporate War are long indeed. Bioplagues, the transformation of the heart of Night City into a radioactive hellscape. Cities the world over reduced to rubble, and the oceanways clogged with self-perpetuating minefields. And then, it just stopped. The threat of nationalization obliterated the corporate interests that had begotten war. Militech was leashed by the new United States, and Arasaka was for the time shackled to Japan. With the war's end, both corporate and national service men and women returned home. Returned to decimated neighborhoods, where corporations had gutted the local economy. Where streets were dominated by thugs and gangers. Theft, extortion, shootouts, all were common. And the local police were either too weak, too deep in the pocket of the gangs or the corpos to care for the people. For many of these soldiers, the prospect of a normal future for themselves or for their children was gone. In Night City, a former intelligence officer by the name of Solomon Wright became the rallying point for this discontentment. Just as he had proudly served his country, he vowed to serve his community. He used his skills to train his neighbors. If the police were too weak to protect them, then they would protect themselves. Taking upon himself the name X and the title of General, he gathered around himself veterans of the war. Veterans of older wars and people fed up with the state of their community. His years of experience provided him with knowledge of the corporations and their executives, much of which they would prefer to keep quiet. Something X was willing to do for the right price. Using these funds, he stockpiled weapons and purchased an old National Guard armory from which to organize, work, and plan for the future. Under his leadership, the organization grew, their ranks drawing upon veterans from all sides of the war. And with his charisma and his motivation, he managed to win a private law enforcement contract from the NCPD. To many, this served to legitimize the organization, with them being viewed favorably for dispensing justice and protecting everyone who followed the law. Internally, this growth saw the creation of 3 formal departments: Impact, the foot soldiers and patrollers, those who would be a constant presence in their community, often patrolling on foot or in motorcycles, supported by heavier armor should the need arise. Investigations, something of a cross between internal affairs, detectives, and an intelligence agency, spying on the gangers and providing intel to those in the field. And finally, internal, the managerial force, overseeing all operations, finances, and the upper offices of the organization. While X stood as the undisputed ruler of 6th Street, he did not reign with absolute power, and instituted a policy wherein, if 2 of the 3 departments disagreed with his position, he would be overruled. Under successive leaders, 6th Street would expand its protection services from Haywood, expanding into Santo Domingo and Little Europe. Their numbers bolstered by community volunteers, veterans of more recent conflicts, ex-police, and corpo security. New, smaller regional headquarters were constructed to oversee operations in these recently acquired districts, and new services were offered to the public, garages and mechanics providing tune-ups, and combat cab offering secure transportation. Still, this expansion brought them into greater conflict with larger security firms. Such competition demanded greater funds. An issue compounded as a number of the execs who had been funding 6th Street began to die off. In the short run, such financial woes were dealt with by selling confiscated properties. Over the coming years, these financial issues grew worse. They were forced to relinquish Little Europe as the Corpos, headed by Arasaka, reclaimed their old plaza in the aftermath of the Unification War. And under pragmatic leaders, a policy of the ends justifies the means flourished. Who cared if they smuggled weapons or stole cars? If they used the earnings to provide peace, protection, and justice. Such rationalizations over time stripped from 6th Street its founding ideals. By 2077, they were no different than any other gang competing for Night City, regularly abusing their community. Their garages turned to chop shops. People were regularly kidnapped and traded at will. Manufacturing and distribution of narcotics flourished. Though it should be stated not all of their actions were illegal. They continued to offer protection, but no longer for free or for the community, but for themselves. Even so, they found themselves supported by Militech and Kendachi, as well as some smaller corporate powers who have found 6th Street to be receptive customers, and many still believe they were a more effective force for cleaning up the streets than the NCPD. In perhaps a fit of irony, 6th Street found itself being torn apart by members who believed they were abandoning their ideals, not because they were engaging in crime, or the fact that they had shifted from seeing the community as something to be supported to a mere source of funds, but rather because under General Morton the gang had increasingly aligned with corporate interest. This conflict brewed over until Morton was killed. The official story is that Morton was betrayed by his closest associates, but rumors persist that his successor, a William Gunner, was involved. More recently, 6th Street has been purged of so-called disloyal elements, and frequent parties are held in honor of the new leader, cementing his position as general. From this position, he has maintained corporate ties, pushed back against the Valentino incursions, and some reports even suggest he has worked with NUSA agents in Pacifica. Whatever the case may be, amidst the unforgiving expanse that is Night City, the future of 6th Street is anything but certain. The gang grapples with the consequence of its choices. Beneath the facade of colors, flags, and talk of justice, order, and community lies the truth of their allegiance to their own desires, becoming a reflection of the very menace they once sought to vanquish. The streets, once intended to be a bastion of safety, reverberate with the fading echoes of what could have been.